Breaking news, guys. So the EU is going to hit China with tariffs on the export of electric vehicles. And these could be as high as 48% with the new tariffs combined with the existing tariff. Yes, there already was one. And yeah, this is happening, and it's happening very soon. And it comes off the back of a video that I did recently where I talked about the fact that China is actually buying its own ships because they are in a state of overproduction at the moment because they've hit 70% capacity for their own market in terms of car manufacturing. So they're overcapacity due to the heavy subsidization of the car industry in China by the government there. And so much is their overcapacity that they decided to buy ships in order to basically export all the extra cars that they are now building. But this could be a monumental political roadblock for that dream of exporting that, well, 30% extra, I suppose, I would assume, if you're saying 70% is the local saturation. And this has been hit by EU tariffs, but that's not all, because there were other tariffs before that. So what actually is happening? What does this actually mean for you and I, the consumer? Well, I'll get into all of that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Right, so let's first of all go through what's happened. So EU to hit China. I'm reading this from the FT, the Financial Times. EU to hit China, Chinese electric cars with tariffs up to 48%. Brussels acts against imports, it says, are heavily subsidized by Beijing, despite German warnings, and this could spark a trade war. Now, apparently, they've been saying this for some time to China, that they need to abide by certain stipulations and regulations where, you know, at the moment what's happening is that the government there is propping up the car industry and subsidizing it, and thereby giving it an unfair advantage in terms of the international or global car industry. Brussels, so just reading on, Brussels will impose tariffs of up to almost 50% on Chinese electric cars, brushing aside German warnings that this could spark a costly trade war. We'll get into that a little bit later. I want to just basically focus on what's actually happening right now. So this has literally happened today. This has happened today. So actually I wasn't planning to make a video today, but I just got home, and that's why this was going to be quite a late one. This is going to be a quite a late upload for me. But I just got home and I saw this news and I was like, oh, I've got to talk about this. So provisionally they're going to apply additional duties of 17 to 38% on imported Chinese EVs from next month. From next month actually means the 4th of July. So actually election day here and tariff day in the EU. And additional, like I said, there was already actually a 10% tariff. So there's already a 10% tariff on Chinese EVs. Now, the rate of which, so 17 to 38%, the rate of that depends on the extent to which the manufacturers complied with the EU anti-subsidy investigation that went into the activities of those car-making companies in China. This was announced last September. This, of course, will affect the big Chinese companies. I mean, I won't go into too much into this video. I've discussed it in other videos, but the fact that the Chinese are way ahead of everybody else, they're leading in terms of electric vehicles and electrified vehicles, simply because they've started their automotive industry infrastructure from scratch within, I would say, last decade or so, you know, compared to the rest of the world, which has legacy manufacturers, which have been building internal combustion engine cars for as much as 130 years. So China got this advantage because they adopted this new technology from scratch, and they were able to build the entire infrastructure around the goal of creating electric cars. So this also means that they're able to create the battery packs, to process the battery packs, etc., etc. The lithium and everything mostly comes from Australia, and then it is processed in China, and then they turn it into battery packs, and the battery packs actually then go into the cars and even are exported. Now, I don't think it's an interesting thing that I was going to come to later, but touch on it now. I don't think that this actually impacts the batteries, because there's an implication there, which I'll come back to later on. But anyway, so for example, they're talking about BYD, which is currently the world's largest manufacturer of EVs. It's surpassed Tesla. And it's a major player in China and on the global stage. They are producing some great cars, which I've reviewed. You can check them out on this channel. Recently, I went to their new headquarters here in the UK, up in Uxbridge. So BYD, you've got Geely, which owns Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and the London Electric Vehicle Company, the people that make the London taxis. They're not electric, those taxis entirely. They are actually hybrid. They're range extender hybrids. These are likely to be hit with tariffs of 17 to 20%. Now, interestingly, what you may not realize is it's not just the Chinese, actually, or the Chinese brand car companies are going to be hit by this, because there are manufacturers, because of the, like I said, because China already has the infrastructure to create electric vehicles, such as the batteries and everything like that. Other manufacturers are also building in China, so famously, of course, Tesla, but even people like Mercedes and Renault are exporting EVs made in China. According to this, they will pay 21%. And Tesla will receive an individually calculated duty rate. So I think there's going to be a little bit more for Tesla, maybe, not sure. Companies considered not to have cooperated with the probe. So these companies that just simply said, well, screw you, we don't care, we're not going to cooperate with your investigation. And this includes SAIC Group, SAIC if you like. They will be subject to the full 38%. So add to that the 10%, that means full 48%. And you will know one of the brands that company produces is MG. I currently have an MG3 in on test, and it's a wonderful little car. The MG EV was, I think MG4 EV was one of the best and most affordable EVs that hit the market. Were the cars that sort of made the most sense. Wonder how long that's going to last. And of course, the most exciting new EV probably that's going to hit our markets is of course going to be the Cyberster, which I discussed in the video that I posted, I think yesterday. I was invited to the launch, but I won't be able to attend because the date clashes with something else. I'm absolutely gutted because that was the one car that probably I was most looking forward to trying this year. Really excited by it. I've seen it. I've sat in it. It's amazing. But what will be the price of that? Because the whole thing about that car was that it was high performance sports car, EV, looks great. Has a fantastic interior, has scissor doors. What more could you want? And I say affordable, but in the context of electric cars, it was kind of not even affordable, but say accessible, compared to say supercar prices. But how long will that be so? I don't know the exact price. I'm not going to say it right now. So the EU Trade Commissioner told the Financial Times, we have no option but to act in the face of soaring imports of heavily subsidized battery electric vehicles from China. This puts our industry at risk of injury. Manufacturers in China that were considered to have cooperated with the EU investigation, which were not assigned individual rates, will be probably subject to a 21% average rate. And that, as I said, that includes Mercedes and Renault. Now, this is going to happen from July the 4th, but they said they would use the 3 weeks until then to define the duties exactly, because, in quotes, we're open to discuss other possible ways to remedy this situation. So this still might not happen, although it has been announced. China's Commerce Ministry said it was highly concerned and strongly dissatisfied, this is a quote, with the ill-informed and lawless EU action, again, quote, warning that it would take all necessary measures to protect Chinese companies' rights. The European Commission this is a quote, the European Commission politicized and weaponized economic and trade issues, said the ministry, the Chinese ministry. The EU fabricated and exaggerated the so-called subsidies. This is a naked protectionist act. Wow. Strong words there. The tariffs championed by France will raise billions of euros for the EU budget annually as sales of Chinese EVs grow in Europe. China, the bloc's largest trading partner, exported 10 billion euros of electric cars to the EU in 2023, according to the Rhodium Group. Yeah, I mean, their sales are growing, and like I said, they are dominating the market when it comes to to the EVs. So this would have a major impact. There's a chart here which shows the dramatic rise of Chinese cars sales. I mean, it's just staggering how quickly they've grown here. Beijing already applies a 15% tariff on European EVs. So this is interesting. So we already apply a 10% tariff to their EVs, but they actually apply a 15% tariff to European EVs that go to China. And that has sought to persuade a majority of EU capitals to oppose the EU tariffs. This is what they're trying to do. Germany, Sweden, Hungary have said they do not approve of the move. Germany, Sweden, and Hungary say they do not approve of the move because they fear Chinese retaliation. EU officials say Berlin put pressure on them to drop the anti-subsidy investigation. Wowzers. This is really, this has escalated dramatically. This is like really quite serious, actually. The market share of EVs imported from China increased from 4% in 2020 to 25% in 2023. Wowzers, that's a massive, massive jump. Geely, which owns Volvo Sweden, Prime Minister said that he joined the Scholz as well. So it actually makes sense because that's their industry affected, isn't it? So it's no wonder that they're complaining about it. The three leaders would need to secure at least 12 other governments to overturn the tariff decision. Member states will vote on them before November the 2nd. That's weird because it's imposed from July, but there's still a vote on it in November the 2nd. I want to also, because your next question, which you're probably screaming at the screen right now, is does it impact the UK? I'm going to refer to a report today in the Auto Express, and they talked to Professor of Business and Sustainability at Cardiff University, Peter Wells, and he said the UK will not be forced to comply with EU tariffs, but it may well follow them. Actually, post-Brexit, the UK is in a vulnerable position on this issue, as the EU and US are both imposing tariffs and other barriers to market entry by Chinese companies, in addition to vehicles produced in China by non-Chinese firms. I'm going to come back to this report in a minute because I also want to share with you a statement that was put out by Autotrader today. Ian Plummer, our commercial director of Autotrader, he said, this is Autotrader, he said the European Union's decision to impose tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles is disappointing, and we hope the UK isn't tempted to take similar action. Although, as Professor Wells says, it's likely that we will. UK drivers, I'm continuing the quote, UK drivers already face a lack of affordable choices when it comes to electric cars, so it doesn't make sense for us to limit those options even further for consumers. We need to bring more buyers into the market by cutting down the green premium, in further quotes, which means that EVs are usually 35% more expensive than diesel or petrol cars equivalents. We'll only do that with open competition to foster innovation, not by reducing choice for consumers. Chinese entrants are already partnering with UK retailers to deliver quality, affordable product, and they will have an important role to play in the UK's ongoing transition to electric vehicles. Now, the thing is, this is what Autotrader said. Now, the thing is, that those are fair points, and I'll come back to a little bit more, I'll discuss that a little bit more, but the problem that the UK has, as implied by Professor Wells here, is that it's stuck between a rock and a hard place, because now that it's on its own, sure, it's out of Europe, because of Brexit, it's out of Europe, so it doesn't have to comply with this. But on the other hand, Europe is imposing a tariff, and America. Now let's look at America first, before we get into any more of that. Hey, are you enjoying this video? Then make sure you've hit the like button. It's very important. Plus, comment, share, and make sure you're subscribing. US President, and this is also from earlier this month. So this is from this month. There's another report from America, which was from a couple of months back, which I'll show you with you in a minute. But this is a report from this month. I think when is it? 15th? 15th of this month. US President Joe Biden is ramping up tariffs on Chinese-made electric cars, solar panels, steel, and other goods. The White House, now they already had a tariff. 25%, I think, was their tariff, right? So the White House has said that the measures will include 100% border tax on electric cars from China. 100%. This was in response to unfair policies and intended to protect US jobs. So they're quite blatantly saying, yeah, this is a protectionist policy. And of course, China said it was opposed to this. Analysts said the tariffs were largely symbolic and intended to shore up votes in a tough election year. This, of course, the tete-a-tete that's happening between Biden and Trump. because Trump has already argued that since Biden is so interested in the EVs, he's killing the US car industry. I mean, the US car industry is sort of already reacting to difficulties that it's having with the EV market anyway, so we're already seeing that. But there's some electioneering going on, so 100%, which would effectively double the price of an EV from China in the American market, is what they're talking about. Biden said that he vowed not to let China unfairly control the market for electric vehicles and other key goods, including batteries. So America will impose a tariff on the battery packs as well. That's not clear in the European one, but in the American one it is. Batteries, computer chips, basic medical supplies. I'll come back to computer chips thing because there's another implication to that. If the pandemic taught us anything, we need to have a secure supply of essentials here at home. I mean, that's a fair point, but also environmentally, it's also a fair point. And I just want to touch on that actually, because this is the other thing I've often said about the rush to move to Chinese cars, or to force people to move to EVs, and to force people to move to EVs. And the problem is that the majority of those are coming from China. And we think of the huge infrastructural scale of operations of mining for the materials, shipping them to China, processing them, creating battery packs, shipping them out to car plants, creating the cars, shipping the cars to markets. I mean, that's a massive, massive infrastructure footprint that we're putting down in this headlong rush to save the environment. And it's almost like we're destroying the environment in an effort to save the environment, because we're creating this massive carbon footprint. And it's not that I'm arguing against doing any of that. What I'm saying is that a natural, slow, normally regulated transition would have been the better option, rather than forcing people to move rapidly and too quickly to electric cars. And then this, of course, there is the issue of moving all of these things around. Like you said, what the pandemic taught us, that we should have stuff at home. And I think this is something that I've actually said before. It's like, the real way to stop the massive carbon footprints, all the CO2 emissions, because a huge amount of that actually comes from shipping, actually, is to stop importing stuff and to create homegrown industries and to create stuff where you are and use stuff where you are. That actually cuts down these things a lot. So going back to this story about, and this is actually from the BBC, I should have said, this was the story about America's tariffs. So as well as a rise from 25% to 100% on electric vehicles, and they're talking about 25 to 50% on solar panels, and also increases on steel, aluminium, etc. Now, the other aspect of the American thing is, which I touched on earlier, was that America is also, because don't forget there was a whole thing about the 5G masts and stuff like that, and the technology the software that is being used, it's all coming from America. Now don't forget there's this whole concept, this whole idea, or in fact a reality, that in China, and it's one of the reasons why, for example, America is trying to ban TikTok, that in China the government can demand to get data from any company there, and including in fact foreign companies that are producing vehicles there. And so what they're worried about is spying, or getting information, or getting data harvesting, all of this sort of stuff. And it actually goes both ways, because last year there was also a story, which I think later they fixed the problem, but at one point there were restrictions in China around major airports for Teslas to drive near those airports and military facilities. And you think, why? And it wasn't because they thought, oh, they're going to self-combust, and that myth is about electric cars self-combusting is not really true. The problem with electric cars is they don't actually catch fire that often. It's far, 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 far less frequent than internal combustion engine cars and hybrid cars especially. But the thing is, of course, that when they do, they're spectacular and they're almost impossible to put out. But it wasn't for that reason that they were restricting those cars. It was literally because they were concerned about all of the radar, LiDAR, sensors, cameras, and the microphones in these cars. So they were concerned about spying. So similarly, this was a story that came out just at the end of February this year. I'm reading this from Wired magazine. The White House warns cars made in China could unleash chaos on US highways. As Chinese automakers prepare to launch, the US White House investigating whether cars made in China could pose a national security threat. Now think about it. All of these cars, particularly EVs, they're basically computer generated. They're computer cars, so they're not computer generated. They're computer controlled. They're computerized cars, right? And they're all connected because they all have over-the-air updates and stuff like that. So essentially, they're connected. And especially when you consider the tech that's going into them, the tracking, the technology to know where they are, to see what they're doing, to, like I said, over-the-air updates, they're definitely connected. So the US government basically said that there's a security risk posed by foreign-made vehicles. So, for example, this was a quote from Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo. I'm assuming this is a she because the name like Gina, she said, imagine if there were thousands or hundreds of thousands of Chinese connected vehicles on American roads that could be immediately and simultaneously disabled by somebody in Beijing. So this would be a result of a conflict or sanctions or basically a falling out between America and China. And they would technically, I suppose, have control of their cars that they produce there. And they go, right, well, if you're not going to concede to our demands, then we're going to just switch off all of these cars. Or could it be worse? Could be like, oh, we can make them drive into each other. So this is already something that has been raised, and they go on in this same report to say that cars have become increasingly computerized and connected to the internet. Vehicles have become vulnerable to new security threats. Hackers have shown it is possible to disable internet-connected vehicles from afar. Automated driving systems and internet connectivity have added cameras and other sensors to vehicles and can also make them mobile repositories of personal information, and also basically spying machines is another thing, isn't it? So this was the other reason why they were very concerned about restricting them. So you can see that America, with the 100% tariff, that's not only a protectionist thing, but also a way to try and curb the subtle influence and power and the ability to control, manipulate, and gather information that these governments may have against each other. So there's a lot of this going on. And so all of that is sort of coming into this whole thing with the tariffs. And another reason why Britain, an island on its own, when faced with this idea of should we go with the European tariffs against China or should we not, which, on the one hand could be great for consumers here. Could be fantastic if we just say, no, we're not charging anything. Bring them over. And we get tons and tons of cheap Chinese electric vehicles. And we're the only country that could do that. So that could be good. But faced with that prospect of being able to do that, which, let's be honest, in a market where actually we're not actually selling that many electric vehicles to private individuals, so there wouldn't be necessarily that much of an advantage, I don't think, in Britain doing that and going against the EU and America and then finding that, okay, well, actually, it's not that much of an advantage. We're not going to sell that many more cars. Remember, our market is relatively small when you compare to Europe and US, so it wouldn't make a huge difference. So it's more than likely that Britain would probably side with EU on this, I think, which is what would happen. And the other problem with this kind of scenario is that it won't be good for the consumer, because the prices will go up. Prices obviously of the Chinese vehicles will go up because the tariffs will automatically put them up, and this will happen very soon. Because if this is kicking in from July the 4th, then basically every car, excuse me, coming in from that point, it will be subject to tariffs. Your price list on websites will overnight go up. So this will have a big impact straight away. Now, the other thing is that what happens in that scenario at the moment. So, for example, last year we saw this massive price war when Tesla cut like $9,000 off the cars across the world on average, and we saw other manufacturers have to bring their prices down. Now, if you take the cheap Chinese products out of the market, then that means the other manufacturer like, oh, we can charge whatever we want. So whereas we're in a situation where we're already saying that the electric vehicles are too expensive, even though they are now coming down and they are approaching, I would say, price parity in many cases, but we could see that bounce back up again. Because once you remove that cheap competition, then that leaves the people that are still here with a kind of monopoly to say, right, well, we'll set new price points because we can, because we're the only ones available to do that. However, the flip side of that is that we have an issue with what we know as the ZEV mandate, or the low emissions trade thing. I don't know what I keep forgetting what the official title is. I keep calling ZEV mandate. And that is that basically it stipulates that a certain percentage of cars that manufacturers sell here, so this year 22%, have to be electric. Now, already manufacturers are actually struggling with that, because I think it's like 20% is what we're hitting at the moment, less than. So suddenly to take all of this out and then for them to put their prices up, so they may not put their prices up as rapidly because they still have to shift these cars in order to, operate in the market and not be fined themselves as well. So that's a whole different ballgame, which I've discussed elsewhere. But yeah, that's a whole other aspect of it. And then the other part of it, of course, is technology and innovation, because just go back from a press trip with Nissan. I put up another video where Nissan was talking about its plans and its future plans, Nissan being Japanese, of course, and they were talking about how they're developing quickly and progressing towards things like solid state batteries, which are going to be quicker to charge, have much better range, cheaper to produce, and not as cruel to produce, if you like, and safer. So you can see the rapid way. So this is the thing, compared to like 130 years of internal combustion engine cars, ICE, the progression in development of that technology has basically been the same. I mean, engines are fundamentally the same, right? But the progression that we've seen already in electric vehicle technology has been staggering. I mean, literally, it's like a car comes out and it's almost obsolete as soon as it comes out, because the next one coming out is even better range, better, improved efficiency, etc., etc. So by doing this, by taking the competition out of it, we're going to slow that rate of progress down, which again is not good for consumers. Because if we're looking forward, if we're holding off moving to EVs because we're like, oh, 2028, Nissan said they're going to come out with solid state batteries, Toyota will, other people will, there could be some other technology coming, the cars will be more efficient, the range will be better, the charging network will be better, but we might go, no, you know what, it's not moving as fast. And we were thinking of holding off, but now there's no point, because that technology is going to be pushed further down the line because manufacturers won't be forced to bring it so quickly. Having said all of that, you know that China is going to find a workaround. And we can already see that because there was another report. Where was that report? I can't remember where it was, but I know what it was. And what it was that China is already moving to set up manufacturing plants. So in terms of America, to set up manufacturing plants in America, so it's subject to a 27%, I think it was, tariff rather than 100% tariff. So they've already found a way to circumvent that. And also, same thing applies in Europe, because I think BYD was already talking about setting up manufacturing plants in Europe. So it doesn't take much for them to go, okay, well, if that's what you're going to do, we'll just set up car companies in your country. So this may all be a hiding to nothing, having said all of that. Or it could be major, significant escalation of trade wars that ultimately, you can see the point behind them. You can see why they're being done, and you can see that in some ways they do make a lot of sense. But on the other hand, you can also see that they could be quite bad news for consumers. It's a difficult one to call, really, and I'd love to hear your comments on it. So I'll catch you all in the next video, and meanwhile, I look forward to reading your comments. Check this out, guys. It's my book. It's my first novel, and it's written for car fans like you. It's a fun political action thriller. It's full of cool cars and spectacular action. Get your copy now at Amazon.com. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.